let's talk about weather modification, shall we? Our guest today is Dane Wigington. Dane is a former energy industry insider who walked away from the Bechtel Power Corporation to sound the alarm on what he calls one of the most urgent and underreported threats to our environment and health: covert climate engineering, aka weather modification. Now, Dane has a background in solar energy and decades of experience. He is now the lead researcher at geoengineeringwatch.org, the largest and most visited platform exposing what he says is a global program of weather manipulation, including spraying from aircraft, cloud seeding, and other geoengineering operations that are reshaping our skies and weather without public consent. He's also the executive producer of the powerful documentary called The Dimming, which dives deep into the science, the military-industrial motives, and the environmental fallout of these hidden programs. Dane has spent over 20 years documenting the changes in our atmosphere, changes he says aren't just about climate, but control. So today we're going to ask, is our weather being weaponized? That is coming up. Dane, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Kim. Good to be here. Thank you for your willingness to examine this most dire issue. Thank you for all your work to try to pull back the curtain on the insanity.
Oh, well, thank you. One thing that is factual and true that is insane is that we have had a lot of flash floods just this month alone in July, an insane number of flash floods. In fact, we all know about the devastating flood in Texas that killed over 135 people. But I don't know if people are fully aware of all of these other sudden flash floods that had happened in New Mexico, Chicago, North Carolina, New York City, Kansas City, Missouri, Virginia. It seems like New Jersey. Every time we Duluth, I just was looking, just yesterday there was one. It seems like every day there's a major flood that's been going on in July. And I read one report, I don't know if it's accurate, that there have been 1,200 flooding reports in July alone, which was like a 75% increase above normal. I also read that we're already going to hit, just in July now, this year, we'll have hit the maximum or the typical number of flooding events, and we're only halfway through the year. So now, after the Texas flood, a lot of people pointed at the company that did cloud seeding and said this. I forgot the name of that company. Was it
Rainmaker. It's called Rainmaker.
Rainmaker.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, a lot of people pointed at them and said, "Hey, look, you were cloud seeding just days before this flash flooding event in Texas." Okay, so we'll start there. What's real? What isn't? What do you think's going on?
First, you're completely correct on the extreme number of flash flood scenarios this year. It's the most warnings ever since record keeping began. Well over 1,000 flash flood warnings. We had 12 once in a 1,000-year flash floods in 3 days in the U.S. about a week and a half ago. So obviously something is very, very different here. And in regard to the manipulation of climate and weather, and at this point, it's absolutely ludicrous that there's any debate about this going on. And the denial from the administration, not just this one, former ones as well, it's worse now, more transparent now, when we have Lee Zeldin making the most ridiculously transparent, meaningless statements about how they're going to tell us everything they know. And it's absolutely ridiculous. For Robert Kennedy to not address this issue, something's obviously wrong there. And again, I would argue anytime anyone who joins the club is in the club, I don't care what political stripe they wear, doesn't matter. Robert's known about this since at least 2012, since Woody Harrelson briefed him at Woody's house in Hawaii. I knew about that right when it happened. Robert interviewed me about a year and a half ago, and we were told by him that he would address this issue. And we've seen nothing so far, except with Robert and with Lee. One, pushing the regurgitated official denial of that this is just jet fuel / just jet exhaust. That's a regurgitated, it's just condensation trail, nothing to see here. And then we had Lee Zeldin go after two PR clowns from Silicon Valley with a company called Make Sunsets, which was a complete publicity stunt. In Baja and Nevada, they released about 140 balloons, Kim. That's not what we see in our skies. They're pointing at that as that this is climate engineering. We have the U.S. government stating on the record what they consider to be the greatest national security threat is the collapsing climate. We have weather warfare as a matter of historical record going back to 1947, Project Cirrus, the first introduction of U.S. military manipulating hurricanes. So again, we have film footage of these aircraft, nozzles visible, turning dispersions on and off. It's not jet exhaust, it's a spray dispersion period. And in regard to the Rainmaker company, as you mentioned, and cloud seeding, completely different animals. So we have a single engine propeller driven airplane. In the case of the localized weather modification cloud seeding operations, it might disperse 5 to 10 pounds of material into cloud moisture. A single military tanker can carry 100 tons in one payload. No comparison. Ant to an elephant.
Okay, so help me understand, because I'm kind of a dummy, I guess, when it comes to this. I think the thing is, you've been studying this for so long and you talk about it so much that a lot of what you say is going to go over my head. It's going to go over the head of a lot of people watching, because we're not savvy to some of the lingo or some of what's going on, right? So try your best to break it down for dummies as best as you possibly can, so that we can fully, completely understand this. So I could understand from like a human perspective why a person who's extremely like what's the right word? But they think they have like a God complex, right? The Bill Gates of the world. He kind of seems like this type of person to me, where they're like, I could be a god, and so I could if I could manipulate the weather. I mean, that basically makes you God. You feel that way if you could manipulate the earth and all of, I mean, that just seems like that's the most powerful thing you could possibly do. And so I could understand some megalomaniac, I guess, thinking, I just want to control the weather. So there's that aspect of it. But I also could understand governments thinking, well, we want to, what's been a threat to humankind throughout time? What's been a threat? And this is always well-meaning. And I know the road to hell is always paved in good intentions. And so you've got these people sitting around thinking, well, what we want to do is avoid drought. What we want to do is avoid drought being a big one, because that kills crops, it kills people, right? So I could see them thinking we need to do something in order to prevent drought. Maybe even getting to, well, if we could prevent drought, maybe we could also prevent hurricanes. Maybe we could prevent storms. Maybe we could do things that are actually so that we can, so I can understand where maybe they would be coming from that perspective. So break it down. What do you think the motive? Let's start with the motive. So, and then we'll get into the mechanics. But what is the motive behind weather modification or geoengineering? Is there a difference between geoengineering or weather modification? Is it the same thing, just a different word?
No. Again,
okay.
Based on the usage of those terms, semantics do matter. Weather modification, for most people, most individuals, most science circles, would mean the localized cloud seeding operations. Again, the ant compared to the elephant. Virtually meaningless. Nothing more than really a red herring distraction from the climate engineering operations. And that's why they so sensationalized this 25-year-old CEO of the Rainmaker Corporation, because they didn't want people to take notice of or investigate climate engineering operations, again, which is nothing more than weather warfare. In regard to the motives behind this, they are malevolent. There's nothing benevolent in these operations. And even think about the basic premise, Kim, with even cloud seeding, what people perceive that as, we're going to make more rain over crops. If you cause a cloud to precipitate in one place, it didn't get where it was going. You're robbing Peter to pay Paul. You don't get something from nothing. When you interfere with the climate system, you cause the butterfly effect downstream. So at this point, there are so many sources of power in this. Again, various countries, they are working together behind the scenes. We have Senate documents to prove that. It's not theory, it's not conjecture, it's not hypothesis. We have U.S. Senate documents, 800 pages long, going back to 1978, specifically outlining the intergovernmental cooperation between, quote, otherwise adversarial nations on climate engineering. So again, whatever their surface tensions are, they're working together in this scenario. And about the power and control part, this is the crown jewel weapon of the military industrial complex, a weapon with which they can, have been, and continue to manipulate populations and countries and blame nature. And again, that's what makes this weapon so powerful for them.
Okay. So I could also understand that motive as well. I understand the military motive, because oftentimes weather has been a big factor on who wins wars. What certain weather hits them, or what weather conditions they end up in. So I could understand from a war perspective of, if we could control the weather, then we could actually control a war. And then, of course, that seeping into, well, we could control people, populations, sure. But let's get back to the basic of weather modification versus geoengineering. So you're saying that these little cloud seeding, and I've heard about these for a while where they could, there's even companies out there, I think you could pay them a lot of money on your wedding day for them to
Correct.
help prevent rain on your wedding day, right? You could pay like 100 grand for this service.
Correct.
So wealthy people maybe do this. And then of course there's what we're hearing about with like Rainmaker, where they can make rain happen in order to, prevent drought or give whatever it is they're doing. So you're saying that's small potatoes, that's okay, they're doing that. And, but that's not the big weapon. The big weapon is geoengineering. Explain what the difference is exactly. So this isn't just a plane going up in the clouds, spraying some chemicals, which is bad enough to make things either stop raining or start raining. This is what exactly?
Okay, first to back into this, they can do both very effectively. They can augment precipitation or rain, or they can completely disperse and diminish it. So let's look at two examples of this. Kim, do you remember in the Olympics, the Chinese Olympics, a decade and a half ago, they said, don't worry about rain, we'll make sure it doesn't.
Mm.
That's how much power they have over precipitation. And that translates even to engineering winter, engineering snowstorms. If people search Chinese scientists engineer winter or engineer snowstorm, they'll find everybody covered. It's CNN, Popular Science, MSNBC, everybody. But if you bring it up here, suddenly you're accused of wearing a tinfoil hat. This is proven patented science, period. And in the case of augmenting rainfall, we have Project Popeye, historical record in Vietnam. U.S. military so successful in the 60s at augmenting precipitation, creating floods, that by the 70s, the INMOD treaties were passed, environmental modification treaties, international treaties forbidding weather manipulation in wartime, but not for a government to do this over their own population. One more factor I can add, and I'll give it back to you. There's another component of this that clearly drastically separates it from the attempt to implicate Rainmaker and this 25-year-old CEO. The frequency transmission networks, ground-based frequency transmission networks that are a core component of climate engineering, were key to the Texas event. When these transmitters energize, and we still have access to these data loops, which I'm very surprised, so we can record in real time the frequency transmissions that are manipulating the moisture flows or the moisture plume and holding it in place. They have a repelling effect on that moisture. So when these transmitters energize around a storm, they virtually hold it in place, causing it to precipitate in one location. That's exactly what happened with Hurricane Harvey. You remember Hurricane Harvey, Kim?
Yeah. Yeah.
50 inches of rain. And how did they know 7 days in advance that that storm was going to go where it went and sit there for days, precipitating 50 inches of rain? And as far as the script goes, and those who read that script, the weather forecasting long-term scripts come from Raytheon and Lockheed Martin, both defense contractors that are neck deep in climate engineering. That script is passed down through the National Weather Service, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, all the way down to the local meteorologists.
Hey guys, thank you for watching this clip from the full Kim Iverson Show, which you could check out Monday through Friday, 5 p.m. Eastern at KimIversonShow.com. See you there.